But I'm delighted that this evening we've got Sim, who is in the product team at n8n. He's a long-time collaborator with Hustle Badger as well, and has done a few like really excellent webinars for us, as well as written some of our AI content. And he's going to be talking through how the n8n product team use n8n to build n8n, basically. So it's like very, very meta. Um, I'll get out of the way. Sim, over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the intro, Ed. And yeah, I'm gonna like have some interactive bits. There's gonna be quite a few memes as well, because I appreciate it's 5 o'clock. People may be feeling a bit sleepy, but I will crack right on really. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm Sim, product manager at n8n, and specifically work looking after the MCP, which is the connection between n8n and Claude. But you're not here to know about me. I'm just gonna jump straight into what's on the menu. So as we know, it is wedding season, and so on today's wedding menu invite, we have as a starter. I'll go through the difference between Claude and n8n and how you can actually use both. How you can get set up yourself because a few things have changed and made it quite a bit easier. And then I'll do like a deeper dive into n8n for product. So I've gone across the product and design team and handpicked a few specific workflows that we've built. And I'll not just show you the workflows themselves, but like the actual inputs and outputs and how we interact with them and the impact it's had on our team and lets us go a lot faster. And then just to wrap up, we'll have some tips and tricks, and then in the after party, we can do the Q&A as well. But I'll be using Slido, so there'll be an interactive Q&A that you can do as we go through. Speaking of Slido, I'd love to just get to know if you're happy to like scan your either scan your QR code or jump in on your laptop with that particular link, just to know kind of what level of familiarity you have with it, just so I know how best to kind of cater this talk to be as useful as possible to you. So yeah, if you've already used n8n, if it's the first time hearing about it, if you've used them both directly or separately, it would be kind of great for me, just so I know where to focus on. I'll give that a few seconds to get those votes in. Cool, nice. So it seems to be pretty overwhelmingly never use n8n, which is great. Hopefully, I can convince you over the course of the next hour to be able to use it. And for those that have used n8n and ChatGPT/Claude separately, this will hopefully be a massive unlock for you being able to get really like the most out of n8n. I also appreciate that you've probably got a lots of other stuff that's battling for your attention at the moment. So just a note to say thank you for taking the time, and hopefully it will be worth it for you. So I'll start off with kind of what is Claude. We all kind of know what Claude is. You have the regular Claude where it's stored, kind of you have the different contracts stored in the servers and you can chat between them. And then you have Claude Code where you can also read and write locally, and then use that to give additional context for how you kind of create wherever you might want to. You can also employ sub-agents to be able to do different tasks in parallel, and Claude is really great for that, and it's a really powerful tool. The only caveat is that when you go to open up Claude, it's a bit of a black box, and you can't always know exactly the rationale as to why it's doing the approach that it's doing. You can use skills, but these tend to be like really big text heavy marked down documents. And I don't know about anyone else, but I'm starting to get a bit of fatigue now with the amount of AI generated content that I'm having to read. Um, and so you kind of end up just having to really just trust that Claude is doing the right thing. You might just be putting it in auto mode at this point. But it's not the only way to be able to do these things, because when it makes a mistake, it just apologizes, semi gaslights you, and it's not the most useful thing to take action upon. Whereas with n8n, and this is kind of a sneak preview into what the UI looks like, but you're able to dive in directly as to kind of where the mistake happened and kind of make those corrections, because the fundamental way that I think about n8n is like a way of writing code, but visually. So you can almost you like draw flow diagrams of these different nodes to write code in a sense without having to kind of dive in and do that yourself or have the background about it. And so when paired with tools like Claude, this becomes really powerful. So as I mentioned, n8n is this workflow automation software where you can set up different triggers. So you can say, oh, maybe just watch my Gmail, and for any super important emails that come through, the agent can determine if it's going to be urgent or not, and then you can either choose to send a Slack alert or do nothing at that point. This is a very simple workflow, but the fundamental idea is that you capture this agent, like Claude-like agent, within a particular workflow that is only being used in that stage. And so this helps you get a lot more determinism compared to just using Claude by itself. It also means that you're not burning tokens in Claude, but you can put it into this dedicated hosted provider n8n. You can choose whichever module you want to do that, so you have more control as to how your tokens are being spent as well. Kind of a mental model that I like to have of Claude is like this mega powerful chainsaw that you just need to know all the different tips and tricks to get the most out of it. And you can chop down 10,000 trees a day, but it's also dangerous in that if you don't know how to use it properly, you might lose a finger or you might end up going straight through the workbench and not just the log. And so with n8n, kind of what you have is this ability to put that super powerful chainsaw into this production line. And so you can say, okay, Claude, I want you to be really focused on just this one thing. You can still have your big, powerful chainsaw to help determine maybe the best way to do something, but fundamentally it will be within this production execution. You can have lots of different workflows within that, and you can also have what we call human in the loop. And so you can create these business automations, add the agents where they're needed, and then get humans to actually check the output as well. So it's not as much of a black box. In terms of the then difference between Claude and n8n, with Claude, it's typically better for like one-off work. So if you need to write this big document, for example, it doesn't make sense to put it into a workflow automation platform, but to just do it directly within Claude. If it is reoccurring, then it would be make more sense to do it in n8n because you can schedule it to happen on a particular cadence or for a particular trigger. You don't have to have your laptop open for Claude Code to be able to work. It can work in the cloud by itself. And so it's great for any reoccurring work. Claude is typically more hands-on, although becoming a bit less so more recently, but you do need to kind of review what it's doing as it goes through. Whereas with n8n, you can kind of set it and forget it, and it will be able to continue to do what you need to when you're not there looking after it. And as I mentioned, Claude is a bit of a black box, whereas with n8n, you have full auditability in a way that's visual, so you can see visually where things have errored, and it's not just a massive wall of text or code. But I'm going to be talking a lot about the MCP. So how do we actually bring these two together? Because it's not either or, and you can have both. So kind of very top level, the MCP is you can ask Claude, hey, please can you build me an automation that reminds me to touch grass each day? Claude will then use the MCP, which I'll explain what that is in just a second, to create this visual representation of the workflow. So now I'm able to see, okay, this is actually what the different steps are. It doesn't have to be just a block of code. It's going to be these different workflows. And then you can get a nice email to remind you to go and touch grass. I haven't done that yet today, so I should have taken that in advance. What is the MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and essentially that is like a recipe book that you can present to agents which know the exact like approach to then use your particular tool. So in our case, we have a few different tools, like more than just these ones, but these are some examples that we surface capabilities and say, hey, Claude, if you want to cook up a workflow, here's the particular tool that you use. It's unified, so we know from our side every time this tool is used, the output is they want to have this particular type of workflow. Or I don't know if I were to use the analogy further, it'd be like if they want to have, I don't know, sprinkles on their cake, they should always use this tool. And all Claude needs to do is tag the sprinkle tool, and then we'll put sprinkles on the cake. So it helps make it a much faster and more seamless interaction between software and agents. It's not just Claude. I do say Claude a lot because we've seen that most users have success within Claude because the MCP connection is the most robust at the moment, but we are looking to make changes beyond that. But you can still use MCP universally. You can use it across ChatGPT. You can also use it in personal coding agents or IDEs. They all enable you to connect via MCP because it's becoming this standard in the same way that API became a standard. And then inherently through n8n, you have access to tons and tons of different downstream SaaS tools. So you can, I don't know, connect to your email, your Slack, but also any other SaaS tool that you have. I pretty much guarantee you'll be able to try and connect to it via n8n. So we form this bridge between the two. But it's not just these ones that you see on screen. As I said, there are a metric shit ton of tools that enable MCP. Chances are, if it's an AI assistant, you'll be able to connect via the MCP to n8n. So as I mentioned, I kind of see n8n as this way of capturing this like God in a box that is Claude and putting it into a production line. But what you can also do with MCP, in that it's not just, if I jump back, it's not just creating workflows, but it's also being able to execute workflows. And so when you have these automations like go and touch grass, it's not just about building that, but you can also use the MCP to trigger that particular workflow. So I don't know, you might be working with Claude and ask it to create a nice email for you, but what you want to send to a particular client, Claude can create that email for you, and then that text can then be packaged and shipped off down the MCP for further review. Maybe it gets sent to one of your managers, maybe it gets put in a draft folder, maybe we create a LinkedIn post off the back of it. You have this full autonomy as to what Claude did, and then you can kind of step away at that point. Or maybe you want to create like a release memo, and you know that release memos all have to go down a particular format. You can create it within Claude and then ship it off through the MCP into n8n. So n8n becomes more of like an operating system for AI, and that you're able to really like productionize the different things that you're working on. An added benefit of it is that it's not isolated to just one individual, in that you as a company can say, okay, everyone needs to do release memos in a particular way. We've created this release memo workflow that will always go through the same steps and make sure the same things are included. And you've got agents to double check that it's always got, I don't know, it always updates the documentation, for example. And then regardless of who is using the kind of Claude, like it could be me, it could be Ed, but we both hit the same trigger. And then so we both get a consistent outcome. So right now, like Claude use is limited to how good people's skills are with Claude and literally their skills. And so through n8n, you can kind of capture that procedural memory in a way that means anyone can get the same benefit without having to have their setup. Speaking of setup, I'm going to now jump into a demo, but before I do that, I'd love to know just what AI tools you're using at the moment. Again, just so I can personalize a little bit how you can get set up with Claude. Also, I believe with the Slido, when I'm not showing a Slido slide like this, you can add questions in as they come up, and we can capture those at the end. I really regret not bringing my water bottle with me into this booth because it's quite warm. Let's see. Anyone got any tools that they're using at the moment? Don't think anyone's responded yet. So tell me if it's broken and not letting you do it.
I think it's broken because I'm seeing responses coming through on the app. So
Okay. The first bug of the day. I thought I was doing so well. Okay. I can. One sec. Can you? I can see that now. Okay, that was weird. It just wasn't updating live. Nice. Okay, so we're seeing majority Claude and Claude Code. Cool. That makes my life easier. And then ChatGPT, Gemini. Cool. Very nice. Cursor Codex. What else? Yes, just on Copilots. There's a few Copilots and there's an OpenClaw. But good to see that everyone's using some form of AI tool, and the majority are using Claude. That's great. That means that I can really give you a direct demo as to how this will work, because my demo is Claude based. For those that are using the have already used n8n, it's pretty straightforward. You come into your settings, and then you can do a one-click connection through for Claude. But as I mentioned, I'm going to do a live demo, and so I'm going to just quickly zoom out. You can see the kind of background here, and I'm going to jump over into my dummy n8n instance. Just double checking, you can see that. Yeah, it looks like it's still sharing, so that all good. Just I can, if you nod, I can you see that? Yeah, cool, nice. So this is like n8n, and as majority of people haven't used n8n before, I'll really just quickly explain what it is. But as I said before, you have particular workflows. You can kind of click into these and configure agents. You can choose a bunch of different nodes from these like different applications and add them to a particular workflow. This is my dummy account. I don't have any really good ones to show you, but what I will focus on is the setup process. So once you've created your n8n account, and you can get a free trial for 2 weeks, or if you're a Lenny's annual newsletter subscriber, you can also get a free trial for a year. You can come into your settings, click on instance level MCP, then click enable access. This gives you a few options, but if you click on connect, you can then see from this drop down how to connect to various different options. For Claude, it's super easy. You just do this one-click setup. It will open up in your Claude instance. You can then see the n8n connector, do a one-click connection, and that will hopefully take me back into my n8n. You can choose if you want to give it full access, or if you want to limit it to particular scopes, you can do that as well. And click allow, and it is super straightforward. We'll set up within my Claude. You can come into the customize connectors, and you'll see that n8n is connected. And then also within n8n, you should be able to see that I have, okay, it's not done, not updated yet, but it will come up here that I've got the Claude client connected. For those that did have ChatGPT, it's a slightly more involved process. We just need to copy this URL, jump into your plugin store in ChatGPT. You may need developer access to be able to do this if you're on a certain level of enterprise plan, but you can just create your own plugin, paste that URL in here, name it what you want, and then you can create your own MCP connection directly through there, and it will connect in the same way that Claude did. So that's the setup. It's super straightforward, but what I'll do now is just quickly switch gears and show. Yeah, so I'm going through this very fast because I want to get to the meat and vegetables of how we actually use it in our product team quickly, because I appreciate the setup's not the most interesting. But yeah, feel free to go back. We also have great docs that explain what we work on and how to get connected. Cool. I'm just going to open up now my actual MCP connection with a content I created earlier. Cool. I believe you guys can see that, but shout if you, yeah, exactly that.
We can see that.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, actually, you can give Claude a URL to our docs, and it will just set it up for you as well, which is quite neat. So yeah, I wanted to create a workflow, and so I just said, hey, Claude, please can you create a workflow in a particular folder that takes a form input asking for feedback on a webinar, saves it in a data table, which is essentially a version like of Excel that you can store directly in n8n. And then each time I get a new response, I should get a Slack message with a sort of short summary. I should then, with the same workflow, be able to ask an agent for any details about the webinar feedback. One tip I have is to always put this in plan mode, because we have a particular tool in n8n called the best practices tool that will get the the way that we build workflows internally at n8n and give that as recommendations for Claude when it's building your own workflows. So if you put it in plan mode, it will prompt you towards the best version of your workflow. Apologies for the wall of text, but you see it's using different tools. And then the benefit of using the Claude browser, or Claude desktop, is that they've now given it browser use. So you can actually open up within Claude your n8n workflow, and this is the actual workflow that it created. And then you can go through and you can see what it was done. You can go in and directly make any changes to the webinar, for example. But you can also get Claude to explain it. So with Claude browser use, you can, in the top right, use the annotate tool. You can draw circles and say, hey, can you explain what this does? Or you can get your pen out and say, hey, what does this node do? Or how can you make this, can you change this to just be, I don't know, a knowledge agent and not just a feedback agent? And so Claude's new browser functionality enables you to do that, which is pretty cool. In this example where I just highlighted this and said, hey, what does this do? And it went through and explained it. So for those of you who are just getting started with n8n, like I can appreciate, especially at the speed that I'm going through it, it's maybe a little bit complicated of a UI, but with Claude, it can handhold you through every step. You can highlight it and it will explain everything in terms of how to get set up and how to best use it. The current interface you're seeing is Claude Desktop on Claude Code, so you can change it into Claude Code, and I've got the native browser extension opened up. So I'm actually in Claude right now, but because of the browser, I've opened n8n within my browser in Claude. So it's a bit of like a nested instance of n8n. We do have an AI assistant directly in n8n, which is a similar UI, but that's separate to the scope of this talk. You can also get Claude to do any updates for you. But one of the things that I find quite interesting is you can get it to test workflows for you. So Claude, say you wanted to create like a webinar form, like this example, you can tell Claude, hey, create 10 dummy webinar reports and then send them through the workflow. They can then create those for you, trigger the workflow, and then you have that data ready for you to do anything you want, like to test downstream. You can also get Claude to query it directly. So you may be used to having Claude using sub-agents already within Claude, but you can build sub-agents directly in n8n and get Claude to chat with those sub-agents using the chat feature as well. So you kind of, again, you have more control of how those are being orchestrated. One of my favorite tricks is using HTML to visualize certain things. And so I've also built a skill within Claude that I can just say, hey, visualize this workflow for me, and it will create an HTML visualization of it that you can then interact with, and it can take you, like, walk you step by step through how this particular workflow works. You can kind of click in and see, okay, this is what this particular node does. And so one of my personal biggest, like, this is separate to n8n, but like the biggest unlock for me has been the use of HTML for, like, I can create prototypes for visual stimulus to like test certain things. I can create like data dashboards super quickly. And with the MCP, you can visualize that. Yeah, for sure. If you just hold my, let me just quickly. I'm going to really quickly grab the GitHub link and then pin it into the chat because I there you go. So yeah, you can use that skill, and it will enable you to explain your own workflows. And it doesn't just stop there. Like, you can get n8n to create HTML as part of the workflow. So one of the examples I'll show later does that, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's like a super quick run through of how this interaction actually works and how it makes building with n8n way easier. Because before, you had to come in here and like add all these nodes in individually and know how the best setup would be. But now Claude can build that for you, guide you through that, and then also trigger it. So it's become like there's a few people internally. It's almost become like a dark factory where they rely on Claude to maintain their workflows, and they just test the inputs and the outputs, and they've got evals set up to make sure that that works well. Cool. I'm gonna jump back over into the presentation. Cool. Nice. And then we're going to move on now into the meat and veg. So I sped through that, but it means we've got a good amount of time now to go through the rest. And that is n8n for product. So as I said, I went through, pulled out some of the most impactful workflows that we use ourselves, and I'll show you those exact workflows. So yeah, let's jump into it. I shouldn't have shared my screen. I'm going to just quickly share something else as well. I can't show the live running workflows because some things are confidential, but what I've done is screenshotted the hell out of it, and then we can go through and see that. Can you see my Figma? Okay, you can just give me a quick nod. Nice, thanks. Sweet. So yeah, on for dessert, favorite part of the meal. I'm gonna go through across 4 different stages how we use different automations. So for research, for discovery, delivery, and then launch as well. We have like a really big policy internally that of dog fooding heavily. Like the product team has dedicated every every second Friday to dog food our own products. And so as part of that behavior, we build a lot of workflows to make our own lives easier. So yeah, these are some of the best from those different dog fooding sessions. But I'll jump straight in with the first one, which is from one that I actually made just a few days ago, which is an automation that where you can tag any message in Slack. It will ingest it and put it into a Notion database. So often people are dumping cool ideas into Slacks, and we wanted to capture that in a way that we could then retrieve it later on. So what I did, so kind of what happens is you can post into Slack. I'll then react with this Kirby emoji because it's kind of like inhaling things. Kirby will then go through. It will ask me if I meant to do that emoji, so I can confirm ingestion. So you're able to put buttons into Slack, which you can then confirm within. Once confirmed, it will go through and react with this GIF to say that it's ingesting all the context. Once that's done, it will give me the thumbs up or the failed emoji if it hasn't worked, and then it will give me the summary within the chat. I can then click into to be able to see the Notion. So every single thing that I've like emoji reacted will then come up here in a way that is then uniform. The AI will determine what tags are most appropriate, what theme it is, and put a summary within there as well. And I also store it in a data table. So as I mentioned before, there's this like you can have tables directly in n8n, so you don't need to use Google Sheets. And then what I then did was I got a different workflow to create the HTML off of these data tables to create this kind of knowledge graph, which helps me see the main themes of the research that I'm coming in, and it's like fully interactive as well, because n8n can also create HTMLs. So that's the like top level as to like how this actually kind of works. But in terms of the workflows, and before I go into the workflows, like you can start with that simple of a prompt, put it in plan mode, and it will guide you towards what makes sense for you. Like you don't have to say, oh, please, can you create this node, then this node, then this node. I literally started with, hey, here's my rough idea. Let's have a sparring session, myself and Claude, and then it came up with that downstream workflow. So very top level, what it does is it just takes the inputs, as I said, it goes through, gets it from Slack, checks it has a link, confirms the ingestion, sends the reaction. And you see here, these particular nodes are called sub-workflow nodes. And essentially what that means is you can nest different workflows within each other. So you don't always have to use one massive one. You can have the same workflow being reused across different ways. So if you always have something that means saving to this particular Notion database, you can capture that in a sub-workflow and then get other workflows to trigger those. This is then the mess of spaghetti, but this looks crazy complicated. But I didn't build any of this. This was all Claude. But what Claude building it meant was that I could then go in and see, okay, here's how this particular piece works. I could change my Slack account directly within here. It gives me these like context sticky notes as well, so you can go through and look. So it looks super complicated, but honestly, I started with a prompt that was this simple, and it kind of ended up something this complicated, and it talks you through. But again, you can just say to Claude, "Hey, what does it mean in this section?" Or you can use that explain workflow skill, and it will do that for you. And then this is then the like HTML building piece where it will get the data table, um, do a few things, and then use code to create the HTML page that you can then use to explore it visually. I won't focus as much unless like tell me if it is useful to focus on these workflows, but what I'll focus more on is the the outcomes, because that's what you can spark the idea for you to then go and prompt Claude and say, hey, I want to do these certain things. Um, yeah, so I prompted Claude because I used a certain open source package called Graffiti, and I said, "Hey, use this when building the workflow," and it built that. But what Claude does is it knows the order to put these workflow nodes in, and so it will just dump those in the correct order, um, based on what makes sense. So I didn't need to do much editing at all. Okay, on to the next one. This is arguably my favorite one. And it's from Rob, who's a staff product designer, and he's essentially built the equivalent of probably 3 or 4 SaaS tools internally through this one workflow. Um, cool, yeah. Martha, I'll spend a bit more detail going through the actual workflows then as well, just to kind of show that. But so what Rob has done is like an end-to-end, fully automated discovery process. That means that me as a PM, I get automatic meetings put in my calendar each week to speak with users. I then speak with those users. They're automatically transcribed. That goes into a Google Drive, which then triggers our own internal version of Dovetail, which I can then do human in the loop review off of. When I'm happy with that then goes into Slack. I get feedback on my interview technique by this AI. And then it goes into a shared Slack channel that anyone can look at to get insights passively, because as n8n we work quite async due to our remote nature, and so it's good to have that information in there. And at the end, we have an agent that you can interrogate the user research information, but I'll show that in more detail now. So it starts off, we use customer IO to create these kind of broadcasts that are automated to go out to our users, and they can then sign up for paid user research sessions. We've integrated with Calendly. I know there's a lot of different options out there, but we've just used Calendly for various reasons. And then so people can just go and sign up and then do this. And at this point, I haven't touched anything. This is fully automated. I then have my unglamorous user interview that I'll then go and do for half an hour, and speak with those users. That's all recorded. When I finish my user interview, it goes into a Google Drive folder that I can then trigger something else. But in the meantime, we've got like a slash command set up in Slack that we just say, send a reward to this email with this name and this much, and it will auto trigger via a tremendous gift card to ping that person that gift card. So we don't need to worry about sending the follow-ups. That's fully automated. There is a human in the loop stage, which is why it's not completely automated. So people don't get gift cards if they don't show up, and if they like aren't the actual user that we're looking to speak to, and they've just kind of gamed the system. We have that human in the loop step as well, which is from Rob saying, "Hey, you're sending £100 to this person, decline or approve." As I said, it all goes into a Google Drive folder, which then triggers a workflow, which I'll show in a second, that then puts it into our own version of Dovetail, which we've creatively called Pigeonhead. But essentially what that is a way to review the video. You get the full transcript. It does a full breakdown already as to like the different opportunities surfaced, because you can load your research transcript into it preemptively, and it gives you clips as well. So this was built separately, but so it's not an automation per se, but automations plug into this. We then have an automation once you approve this, because you can make any tweaks you want to. It then gives you interview feedback. This is some feedback I actually got, so quite humbling. And you may have noticed it's Darwin. Darwin is our user research agent, so we try and make these things creatively. Darwin is an agent created within n8n that is then surfaced in Slack. And so yeah, we get some feedback that Darwin's been trained on, like user research best practice. Um, and then we have then the human in the loop review. So then Darwin would take what you put into Pigeon Head, send it to you in Slack, and say, hey, here's the different opportunities that it got. But what we are very passionate about is not fully automating all of our thinking as product people to n8n. And so we have this key takeaway section where everyone is told to write this themselves by hand, so that you're actually thinking through your user research, how this applies to your product, etc. And so my personal approach is that I actually have like an empty Notion doc whenever I do user research, that I would take notes as I go through, and then I'll use that to then fact check some of the stuff that Darwin's done, and also create my own takeaways, because I don't want to lose that user empathy just by fully outsourcing that to the automations. Once I've approved it here, it then pings it into a user research thread that anyone can then look at it. As I said, we're trying to make that as open as possible. And then I can also go to a different Slack channel called Darwin that I can then say, hey, can you answer any questions about this? And this is interesting because it also pulls stuff from Salesforce, from Gong, from our community forum. It's not just user research, so it pulls a lot of things into one place. We've also built out a builder agent within Darwin, which is super meta, but we've given our n8n agent the ability to use the n8n MCP to improve itself. So part of the eval loop is that if I'm in Slack and I say, hey, this isn't great, it can build its own workflows by using its own MCP, which is like mind-blowing stuff. Oh, the gift didn't load, but yeah, that was my brain when Rob made that. I'm conscious of time, and so I think because I've got two more to get through and a few other bits, so I might just quickly surface level go through it. But essentially, yeah, I'll pause on them so you can quickly go back and look at the recording. But this is one of the Slack triggers. We've got these groups to make it a bit easier to look at. This is the mega agent that does all of the like pulling information from Gong, from the user research. So you can see there's lots of these triggers. Again, AI can build this for you. Don't worry about it if it's too complicated. And then yeah, this is the builder agent that we've built before. Cool. I saw there's a few questions that popped up. Let me just quickly see. Purchase n8n already purchased YMD files on a computer with skills and use Claude Cowork to manage workflows. So good question. We actually have our own n8n skills that I will share now, but I also highlight in the presentation. But these are skills that we give Claude to build the best possible workflows. And yes, we do have n8n in the healthcare sector as well as drug discovery, but you do need to have like typically the enterprise level license for the security. The good thing about n8n though is that you can also self-host it. It's completely open source, so you can download it and self-host it yourself, which is what we've seen work best for those types of sectors. Cool. I'll come back to the questions in a sec, but I'm keen to get through the rest of these workflows. So this one's from Dylan, who's a senior product manager level 2, and he built an automation that has like self-updating PRDs. So we have like our roadmap, which as you can understand, we've got to blur out the details, but essentially within each of these Notion pages, we have a PRD. And then we also have Slack. I had to just choose a random Slack channel, so I choose the one with cute pets in it. But essentially what we have is a way for this PRD to be automatically updated by anything that's going on in Slack that's relevant. So we've got a workflow that will classify messages and say, okay, here's the Slack digest from yesterday, which ones are relevant to this particular roadmap item. It will go through, it will extract the decisions. So say you're going back and forth with an engineer about some of the feasibility assumptions, it will take out that information. And then it will update the Notion PRD with like a decision log each day, so you can have an updated understanding of what the team is talking about with regards to PRDs. So you don't need to do that yourself. So that's a fully automated updating PRD that looks like this. So you can it will get the execution, it will see the daily history, it will get the threads in Slack, um, pull that together, and then uh, output that into the Notion. Again, this is all made by AI. This one was made by the AI assistant that we have in the app, which you can get to in the top left, which is similar to Claude and MCP. And then this is then the trigger to append it to the decision log at the end. And again, you're seeing these sub workflows, because that's how you really make n8n more powerful, is using these different sub workflows. Okay, last one. And this last one is from one of the group product managers, and he's built a fully automated launch process within n8n. So how many credits is Darwin eating up? That is a good question, because we've actually got a leaderboard internally, and Darwin is the third biggest agent for eating credits, because that boy's hefty. Anyway, so Fabian's made a workflow that means when a linear project is completed, it's mapped against the actual work that happened in GitHub, creates the documentation, as well as a release memo, which is then converted into a slide that the enterprise team can share. Again, you can take that prompt and then put it into your Claude, and it will go and start asking questions, so you can build that yourself. When anyone can create workflows, how do you stop people duplicating things and make sure it's clear who's responsible for maintaining what? Yeah, that's a good question. Within the MCP, one of the tools that we have is a search workflows tool. So it will be able to search other workflows in your instance and see, oh, you've already got one that's like this. Do you want to just reuse that or modify that slightly? So it has that level of intelligence. We are looking at also creating more of a dependency map, so you can see the dependencies. In terms of the maintenance, one thing that we recommend is using projects, using folders, and like user permissions, so you can define who's maintaining what and who's responsible for the different projects as well. Also, just one of the questions about, can I prompt n8n to build a connection or MCP instead of coding? I'm not sure what was meant by that question, but if you just put a bit more context, I can answer that one. And then keep a separate place for my own thoughts. Yeah, exactly that. I think the more I've built with AI, the more I really value writing things by hand, because it's such a forcing function for good product thinking, in my opinion. And so I still do a lot of that myself. Cool. But yeah, let's jump into this workflow. This is probably the meatiest of all workflows, but it's a really cool one, so I wanted to show it to you regardless. So we have, like, in our linear projects, we'll have like full details about what the work is that's going to be done. When that's done, it then, just through a native linear integration, we can then have the GitHub PR also surface within linear. When that happens and is released, it then triggers and creates an automated release memo that the sales team or the product marketing team can use. That release memo then auto updates our documentation, so that you can then, so our docs, for anyone who's using n8n, can then reference that. Once that's updated, it also updates our change log automatically, so you can see that there's a human in the loop filter, so only the cool things are included in the change log and not just the minor fixes. And then that auto creates a slide in PowerPoint that the enterprise team and the account executives can present to their team, again, without anyone having to do anything manually. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to do like a super zoomed out version of this, but you can see how girthy these workflows are. There's a few of these code nodes within it, which essentially allow you to do more powerful things than you would do with just the native nodes. But again, the benefit of using the MCP is it can write that code when it needs to, and then use the native workflows when it doesn't. But yeah, it just kind of gets the information from linear. There's a few kind of bits that takes from GitHub. You get Slack notifications as it goes through. It then uses the HTTPs to then open the PRs, submit it, and then set them in linear, and then give Slack updates as well. And this is the mega release memo writing, that it will take various bits of input. And the screenshot was so big, it's a bit blurry, apologies, but it kind of goes through, gets the release memos from Notion, gets the GitHub updates, um, looks at the existing feature gaps, that it knows how to better write the release notes. It then goes to this embedded release agent that then will write that release notes and then share it in the different platforms that I mentioned before. But yeah, that is another like lightning run through of how we're using n8n in n8n, from research to discovery to delivery and then launch at the end. I'm going to just jump back now over into my slides. I hope that was useful. Feel free to put questions in on anything that I shared there before. Cool. I had this slide here as like a backup just in case there were bugs in that, but it seems to have gone well, so it wasn't really needed. But anyway, you get a free meme at the end of the day. Cool. So now into tips and tricks. One of the things I'd say is, this is a really core one, is that you can use multiple MCPs when building with Claude. So you can connect not just your n8n MCP, but also, let's say, your Notion one or your Gmail one. And so if you're creating a workflow that, for example, needs Google Sheets, and you've connected the Google Drive MCP as well as the n8n MCP, it will create the Google Sheet for you, configure it in a way that matches the workflow, and then embed it to the workflow without you having to do a thing. So anytime you're working with these different tools, it can take that context to then improve the workflow that's being built. Again, apologies, I'm going to go through these quite quickly, but I want to leave a bit of time at the end. And then the skills I already mentioned, and I put the link into the chat, but these are essentially different instructions that tell Claude how to best use the MCP created by Liam. You can also create your own skills and based on your own preferences, and then attach them as well, so Claude knows that you always want to use Gmail rather than Outlook, for example. The data tables I touched on, so I'll go through, kind of skip through, but essentially these are the different types of fields. So it's not a full replacement for Excel, but it lets you store information in a way that's easily retrievable. Error workflows. So you might think with these really big, complicated workflows, it's like, how do you know if something breaks? You can just tell Claude to make an error workflow. So then if anything breaks, it will then just ping you a message. You don't need to go and monitor that all the time, which was a big issue before. You can get it to document your workflows. So if you already have n8n workflows, you can just tell the MCP to create a Notion doc based on the workflow, and you can then share that with the team. The HTML one I showed you before. The models is just, you don't always need to use the most powerful model when using the MCP. Like, it does also work with Sonnet depending on the size of the task. And so yeah, it's pretty token friendly in that sense. And then last but not least, it's a big team effort. So I wanted to shout out to everyone who was involved in the work. There's quite a lot of people, past and present, in the team as well, who contributed to that. Phew, and now not much time for Q&A, but some time, which is better than what happened last time in the Claude Code webinar, where I went straight to the end. So yeah, I'm going to pause for breath, and then I don't know, Ed, if there were any ones that popped up that I missed, or if not, we can look at the one that's on screen as well.
There's a few in the chat, so it's just like when you answer this one, and then flick over to the chat and we'll go through that.
Cool, perfect, sounds good. So yeah, what's the difference between building Markdown files on computer and using a harness like Cowork and using n8n? Yeah, so with one of the things about using Markdown files is that it's also typically encoded within an individual. So if I'm working with Ed and I've got a Markdown file stored locally, Ed can't access that without me sharing it to him, and that's a bit boring for him to implement that himself. But if you encode that skill within an agent in n8n, then when Ed and I both use that agent, you have a unified way of us kind of using that or solving that particular issue. And then, yeah, in terms of using a harness like Cowork and using an n8n, it depends also on the task. One of our team did a really good blog on n8n versus Claude, when to use which. I'm just going to quickly grab that because that will help answer the question in more depth that I can cover in 2 minutes. Um, How do you go about testing workflows? Does n8n have a test framework or run after you change a workflow? How does one deal with version controls of workflows? That's a really good question. So, how we go about testing workflows, I personally use the MCP to generate test data that I can then run through. We also have a native eval suite built into n8n, so you can create evals in n8n. So whenever we have agents that are being used, like Darwin, for example, we'll have evals with test cases that have either been synthetically created or from user interactions, and then use that to measure any improvements that we're making. Same with the MCP, we have an eval suite that we've built on our own internal tool to measure progress or performance of the MCP over time. We do have a diff feature, so you can see the difference between versions, and you do have version control as well. In the top right corner, there's a button that you can click where you can see all previous versions. And whenever you make any changes with the MCP, it will automatically create a new version with full description as to what the changes were made as well. Cool. Jumping back into the chat. Oh, that was the same question. Nice. Thanks, Martha, for putting it in the same place. I appreciate it. If there is a new tool I want to connect, can I prompt n8n to build a connection or MCP instead of coding? Yeah, absolutely. So we also have a registry within n8n that you can connect directly to any other MCPs within n8n. So you can put all that context into n8n. And if there isn't any node or MCP available, we have a really thriving community that create community nodes that you can find on GitHub that you can then use for those tools as well. Because HubSpot is already a connection that we do have. We have a lot of ones related to marketing, if that's what you're interested in. When is V3 coming up, and what's new? That's a good question. We The short answer is lots of stuff are new, but they won't necessarily be in V3. We don't do massive releases due to the nature of some of the enterprise customers. So, but I know we're working on some pretty exciting stuff. We've recently released our own kind of version of Claude within n8n called the Assistant, where you can build programmatically within n8n. We're also soft releasing agents, which is a curated to build your own agents, similar to how you have Hermes, but embedded within n8n directly. So agents like Darwin, you can build through a dedicated UI. You can you can implement them directly into Slack. And so that agent's functionality has just been released. And I'm also working on some few things which, yeah, keep your eye out for because they're not quite ready yet to share. Cool. Were there any other questions or any things that I missed or anything in the last few minutes you want me to quickly touch back on again because I raced through?
This is fantastic. Maybe if I can just kind of summarize some of my key takeaways. Seems like you're really advocating for teams using Claude and n8n in combination, where Claude has this kind of like natural language interface, but then n8n allows you to kind of systematize things in a way that means that a whole team can use them in a standardized way. You have these workflows then that you can observe that are much more reliable, much more predictable, and everyone can have access to. And whilst these flows can look very difficult to build out because you look at the graphs and they're quite complicated graphs on the canvas. Actually, so that doesn't really matter because Claude takes care of all of that. You just tell it what you want it to do, and it will kind of create it, and then you give it feedback if it needs it. I mean, is that a kind of a good summary?
That's a perfect summary. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. And part of that as well is because a big part of our ethos is like open source. You can also embed like open source models directly into the workflows. you've got much finer control as to how those costs are being used. So you can say, I don't care this much about this particular linear workflow, so I'm going to put a weaker model into that. Whereas if you're working in Claude directly, it might choose a more expensive one, so you're more likely to burn tokens. We also run evals based on token efficiency and cost, and it's cheaper to build in n8n than it is to build with Claude as well.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, obviously, coming from n8n, you're going to be advocating for n8n, but I can really see a use case here where teams use n8n or something like n8n, right? But as that kind of like shared layer for um, coordinating and automating kind of joint workflows, whereas Claude's, is great, but also its strength is really in the kind of as a personal tool that you can then use to interface with that.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And we're leaning into that a bit more, and so we're going to help you make that process even easier. Um, but yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully, I didn't go too fast. I did my best M&M impression, but I wanted to make sure you saw all the different use cases. But yeah,
Yeah, amazing. Look, I put your contact details in the chat so people can reach out to you if they want to. We'll be getting the recording of this up onto our YouTube channel as quickly as possible, and we'll send out a little summary as well. But Sim, thank you so much. That was like really amazing to see some of the stuff that you're doing and just see how you kind of um, use, I think, what are actually fundamentally two or three kind of like quite straightforward techniques there to really build these like quite sophisticated flows that are then doing like really amazing things for you. Saving you huge amounts of time, like setting up the customer interviews on an automated basis. I thought, yeah, that was one that I love.
yeah, no, thanks so much. And yeah, thanks for the platform. I do appreciate everyone taking their afternoon up to listen in. And yeah, if you have any questions or need to get set up or anything, just drop me a message on LinkedIn and just mention that you're a part of this webinar. I'm also in the Hustle Badger community, although um, not as active as I used to be because I don't have as much time these days. But you can still ping me a message there as well.
Super. Well, thanks very much, Sim. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along, and we hope to see you all soon.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.